We're talking to Max Wolter, our local DNR fisheries biologist here in the Hayward area. And Max, one of the things that happens sometimes, not all the time, but there's always a little bit of it maybe going on in some lakes is what we call winter kill. It's an interesting topic.
Yeah, it is. It's something people start to think about this time of year once the lakes are ice covered. Winter kill affects lakes differently, and the main factor is lake depth. Shallower lakes are a lot more likely to winter kill than deeper lakes. So winter kill doesn't happen very often on Whitefish Lake or Grindstone Lake, but if you're looking at Deer Lake or some of the shallower parts of the Chippewa flowage, winter kill can happen there. Spring Lake's another one where it's happened pretty
It's an
frequently.
oxygen thing, right?
Yeah, so what winter kill is it's basically the oxygen being eaten up. And once that ice cap is on the lake, there's no more oxygen coming into the water from the air, right? That's
Right.
what's happening all summer. But once that ice cap is there, you don't get any more new oxygen. So then you're basically starting a timer. And that oxygen just starts to get used up as the winter goes on. In a shallow lake, there's just not a huge volume or reservoir of oxygen to pull from. So the oxygen can get used up, fish can die. Some fish are more susceptible to it than others. Different fish have different oxygen tolerances. Northern pike are very tolerant to low oxygen, as are yellow perch and bullheads. So some of these borderline winter kill lakes, you'll see a lot of those species in there because they're the ones that make it through. Bluegills, crappies, bass, they're the ones that are going to get hit a little bit harder.
Well, there's things that make oxygen out there besides getting from the air, though, too. You got plants and algae and stuff. But what happens there?
Yeah, great point. So it is a little more complicated than just the lake gets covered. If the plants can continue to get enough sunlight, they can continue to produce oxygen, just like trees do.
Photosynthesis.
Photosynthesis, yeah. And my wife's a plant biologist, so I learn all this stuff from her. But once you get a good snowpack on the lake, that light can't penetrate anymore, and the plants can no longer go through the process of photosynthesis. At that point, the plants are actually using up oxygen, and any of the dead plants are decomposing, and that's using up oxygen too. So once you get ice cover and then thick snow, then the oxygen really starts to go pretty quickly.
So what sets you up for besides having thick ice and a heavy snow on top, what, the length of the winter?
Yeah, that's a big factor. So I mentioned that timer. So as soon as the ice is fully covered on the lake, you start your timer, and your timer keeps running until ice out. If you get a winter that stretches on for an extra month, longer than normal, that's the situation where you're going to see some potential winter kill. If the ice goes off early, the fish are going to get that relief. Once the ice is gone, you get more oxygen from the air.
Well, is there always maybe a little bit of that happens on the lakes and select areas and stuff, or is it just what?
Yeah, it can happen in select areas, especially in a complex lake like the Chippewa flowage. We do monitoring on the Chippewa flowage in the winter. In the past, we've done up to 13 or 14 sites, and it's amazing how different the oxygen is from one site to the next. Some areas will be really good. Some areas are just kind of chronically bad, low oxygen areas. And it all depends on, the depth of that area, how much decomposing plant material is there. Things like that will really impact, how much oxygen you have. And the fish are responding to it. And this is something anglers can, be aware of and maybe take advantage of. Oxygen's eaten from the bottom up. So the bad oxygen is always going to be at the very bottom of the lake. So if you're fishing the Chippewa flowage and you get into February, that oxygen at the bottom is going to be pretty bad, and the fish will be higher up in the water column. They might, they'll start being 4 feet up, and then they'll be 6 feet up, and then they'll be 8 feet up. And in a really bad winter, they're going to get pretty close to, the top of the water column by the end of the winter.
Well, it's oxygen is what's making them move up and down. And, oxygen is something that anglers, summer or winter, should be aware of because we have situations on lakes. I know Moose Lake, for one, oxygen levels in there in the middle of the summertime when the water temperature gets up to close to 80 degrees. It is terrible down in deep water, and the fish move up there, too. So it's something people need to be aware of.
Yeah, right. So, in the summer, you can have those low oxygen situations, too, especially once a thermocline sets up, because then the water is not being exchanged between the top and the bottom in the water column. So that oxygen in the bottom layer will get eaten up. The oxygen in the top layer will typically still be good. And if you can figure out where that split is, you can get an idea of how deep you might need to be fishing.
Well, actually, there's a point in water temperature, too, where water doesn't even want to hold oxygen.
That's right, yeah. So here's another complicating factor is the water temperature. Colder water holds more oxygen. So when you're talking about like ciscos and whitefish, that's a really important thing to consider is not only do they need oxygen, they need cold water. So you have to have kind of an area where that overlaps. And in the summer, sometimes ciscos will be just confined to a 1 or 2 foot area in the whole water column where they have both cold water and good oxygen. It's pretty remarkable.
Well, when you run into a winter kill situation, you're monitoring. How do you guys react to that?
Yeah, well, we can't make lakes deeper for the most part. So in a lot of cases, some of these lakes that winter kill frequently, it's largely unavoidable. There are projects in the area where we'll do aeration. That's fairly common in some of the national forest lakes, especially some of the smaller ones. You get down into kind of like the Rice Lake Barren area. They do a lot of aeration projects there too. And they can be successful, but they are very expensive to run, and typically it only will work on a smaller water body. What we tend to see is when we have winter kill, it's usually not complete. So it doesn't mean that all the fish are wiped out, but it might be 90, might be 95%. And then there's a handful that make it through. The years after a winter kill can actually be some very interesting and can lead to some pretty productive fisheries, because now that 5% of fish has 100% of the food, right?
And they grow fast.
And they're growing. So you see that especially with bluegill. Their size will really shoot up after a winter kill. You'll see that with some of the other panfish species as well. So there's opportunities. Another thing that Frank had done in the past, and we've done it a couple times since I've been here, is if a lake has a winter kill or close to a winter kill, we can sometimes come in and stock some trout right after that. And the trout will do fairly well throughout that first summer because there's that open space. So we've done that in places like Silverthorne Lake.
Yeah, interesting. Well, you correct me if I'm wrong here. I mean, like you said, the good news is that it's very rare as you wipe out the whole fish population. The bad news is, from what I understanding, it usually takes the bigger fish out.
Yes, yeah, it does tend to take out the bigger fish, and it takes a while for the population to recover back to what it was. We saw that on Spring Lake a few years ago, and it was a really unfortunate thing because that lake had a fantastic largemouth bass population, had a decent panfish population, some nice pike. And we had a winter kill, and it really set back a lot of the fishery, especially that bass population that got hit pretty hard. But
they come back fast.
But they come back fast. And, a lot of times when we have a winter kill, people want to see the DNR do some stocking. That's not always necessary because these fish can reproduce very well on their own, especially your bass and your panfish. They're going to fill that void in no time, and it just takes a little time for them to get back. There's typically not anything we need to do other than, be patient and kind of give them a chance to reproduce and grow on their own, which is what they've done for hundreds and thousands of years before we were ever even here.
Way before us.
Way before us. So, winter kill and oxygen, it's a complicated factor. Fortunately, it's not something we deal with on most of our lakes here. Winter kills
just the right winter and the
right winter and just the certain kinds of lakes. But it also presents some opportunities too.
Well, Max, I want to thank you for coming on here. It's been very interesting and informative talk here.
You bet. Thanks. And good luck to everybody out there fishing.
And folks, if you enjoyed this interview with Max, just subscribe to our channel because we're going to get him on here as often as we can.
I'm living in the north 'cause that's where I want to be. The fish and wildlife they abound, living in the north country. The woods and water, lakes and streams, we've got 'em all around. And people come from far and near to share what we have found in our Wisconsin outdoors. Breathe in that clean fresh air, hear a partridge drumming on a log, see a fish jump or a bear, spot a white-tailed buck or a flock of ducks as they wing across the sky. And this land that we call paradise will show you the reasons why in our Wisconsin outdoors. Living in the Badger State, way up in the Northland where the recreation's great. So sit back, relax, kick off your shoes, sink in your easy chair. Come on along, listen with me, I'm gonna take you there to our Wisconsin outdoors, our Wisconsin outdoors.